And I'd like to thank Sam for joining us this evening. And thank Terry and Emma for making the suggestion that I contact him and have him on the show.
I appreciate you guys having me on here.
Yeah. There'll be others probably over the course of the next half hour filtering in. I've just learned I'm going to start reasonably on time rather than wait for everybody. So Sam, I have a question just to start with.
Fire away.
How high can you jump?
Oh,
That is such a great description.
well, I usually put something at the end. I used to say that I could recount pi to a certain amount of decibels, or I could run really fast. And this time I'm like, I think I can jump really high. I actually have, I like hops, but I have no hops.
Yeah. And we've known each other for almost since the first time you guys brewed beer at Niagara College.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were one of the first bars that took us on tap.
Yep. No, I remember clearly you came in and you started talking to me and I'm like, whoa, no. The guy you need to talk to is right over there. And you went over and started talking to Troy, and that was the beginning of a great friendship.
Yeah, it was, it's important to remember where you start and where you come from. You guys, if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be able to build for where we are. And
yeah.
Back then I didn't know what I was doing trying to sell beer. I was shooting from the hip. I was a brewer. I just needed to sell the beer and get it out there. So I got a list of bars that people told me were cool in cities within the hour and a half of Toronto. And I just went out there, and you guys were gracious enough to put us on tap. And we did a couple of events back then. And
yes, we did.
I think in the beginning, James, after I sort of faded into the background, James Edgar was our sales rep out there. I feel like that might have been our first Southwestern sales rep.
Yep, I remember James.
He was a shooter. Jimmy Two Shirts. That guy was those sideburns, and I don't know. He's an interesting fellow. I really like him a lot. He's out in Ottawa now, but he's a fun guy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I
think you guys had one of the first beers you had on. I think we did an LDV event out there. We're going back
10 years almost.
Yeah. I was actually writing a blurb today for another beer, and it was 6 years ago. And then I had to go back into my notes and find it was actually just shy of 10. It's been 10 years since we started doing this. And in my head, it was at 6. I was off by a mile.
Yeah.
We're going to be rebranding Lone Pine, and it was sort of a trip down. Nothing's changing with the beer. We're just changing the imagery on the outside of the can, and searching through old emails, finding out when we launched it and what day was December 21st, 2011. And I think that was the third beer we did. So sometime before that was the first. So it'll be 9 years this November.
Yeah.
Or October.
Yep. I got to say, 2011, it seems like an eternity ago. And you, Rob, Carla, you started that journey contract brewing at Niagara College.
Yeah.
And as I recall, you, as the brewmaster, were always constantly on the leading edge of innovation in beer.
Maybe in 2011.
2011. Troy turned to me a couple of times and it's like, do you really think we should try this? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. Go for it. Just bring it in. Don't even think about it. And what I want to know is what was driving all that innovation with you?
When I first got into beer, one of the things that I really loved, I did love traditional styles, and that's originally what got me in, but also the idea that, beer could be anything. And it was basically just an endless possibility of mix of ingredients and finding the right blend, and it could be anything. And just starting out, you know, it was a blank canvas.
I'm okay
And
with
back in 2011, when there was not that much, there wasn't a huge amount of choice at the time.
Nah, well, we
Pushing
found
the envelope seemed a lot easier. Now it seems a lot harder. I mean, we still try to do innovation, but it seems a little bit more difficult in the space that we're in now. But in 2011, with this wide open expanse, it was
We're not on.
it was just that's it. That was just it. It was a wide open expanse,
I'll turn it off.
and the just wanting to make a splash and get the name out there. I think selfishly that's what I want to do. I read the book, the Sam Calagione book, when I was in school in Germany, and like just sort of his exuberance and willingness to do the next crazy thing sort of inspired me. And I don't necessarily think that we model ourselves anywhere near what Dogfish is. It was his attitude and his, you know, how over the top he was. I really like that idea, and sort of pushing that, being adventurous and like putting on events that got people excited, that kind of thing. That spoke to me a lot.
Okay. Next fall is 10 years. If you could time travel and go back to talk to your younger self, what would you tell him and your partners to do more of?
Holy shit. Not listen to me as much sometimes. There's a few things that I think about that, you know, I really pushed that I wish maybe we wouldn't have. And they seem at the time like I really was bullish on keeping beer at a certain price point because I wanted it like so everybody had access to it. But in hindsight, I think we were losing money for the first couple of years because I just wanted it available, and I didn't look at a lot of things, and I just sort of stuck my thumb in there, and that probably we should have priced differently. Maybe we should have stayed in the warehouse at the LCBO. The stuff with our beers and what we made, I wouldn't change a thing. I quite enjoyed what we did and sort of like the brand that we created. That part of it I'm very proud of, but like it's the business part of it, which I thought I probably should have taken a step back a little bit and let other people much smarter than me take the reins on that.
Okay. I take, you know, I love the beers that you do. I love the marketing and the idea and the creativity that you bring to the table. So that's an interesting thing. So you would push yourself a little bit away from the day-to-day business side of it.
Yeah, like I think I had these ideas in my head that might have been a little bit more romantic than I needed someone a little bit more practical to look after that side of stuff. And, you know, I was the dreamer, so you need the other half of the coin to make it work. And if you push too hard, if you're just a louder person, a lot of times that'll just be what happens. But someone who's a little bit more pragmatic might have, you know, got us on better footing sooner. I mean, it's not like we're in a bad situation. I think those things might have been smarter to do earlier on. And I mean, I'm happy where we are. I'm happy what we've created, and I just, you know, if anyone comes to me and tells me this is what I tell them. Like, here's what I've learned. Don't do this.
So what would be the one thing you would tell me not to do?
Do not become a brewer. Don't open a brewery. It's funny, like, if you ever talk to Peter Kyoto from Flying Monkeys, I remember the first time I met him, he's like, why are you doing this? Like, you're crazy to do this, because it is hard. It is a very, you know, it's a tough thing to do and to make money at and to make a business and a go of it. You see, it's not just this romantic idea and it's going to happen. You got to really want to be there, and each day there's always a new fire to put out, and I find it very exhilarating. And the fact that there is always a fire to put out, it keeps you excited and keeps you wanting to do more. But there are days that are hard. Like when we have like our brew team is we're always pretty close, but every time somebody leaves, you know, it makes you feel really, I'm not sad for that they're gone. I'm sad that I'm not going to work with them anymore. I'm going to miss them. And it's always people move on, and learning that's been hard. And literally our head brewer is leaving. Brendan, we lost our Caleb last year at around this time. And then Brendan is moving back to Toronto. His wife's pregnant with twins, and he doesn't want to leave Sawdust, but so he's going to become a sales rep in Toronto. But it's sad that he's moving on, and getting used to that, you know, departure is something I never thought I'd want to get used to. And then yesterday I get back and find out another brewer's leaving, and it's like, Christ, what do I do? Like, it's finding a fire. I mean, it's the day I get back from vacation, and basically a giant hole just gets ripped in our production team, and it's like, okay, now we got to plug that hole. Gets a little bit, sometimes it's weary on the soul, but you know, in the end, we still get to make beer, and we still work with a great team. And don't be sad that they're gone. Be happy that you got to work with them, kind of thing.
Yep. Almost every owner and brewer I talk to has said running a brewery is not as sexy as people thinks it is. I hear you. And you are a big family because you work so hard and so much together. I hear.
We love to go, like, it's not just the work, it's going out and learning together and develop. The beers aren't just done by one person, it's done by the whole team. And
yeah,
you know, when we start with something, there is an idea, like maybe I've written a recipe, but that recipe will invariably change based on, you know, how it comes out, and then how can we produce this and repeat it on a way that's, the process is acceptable to work on a weekly basis. Like sometimes it's just so bonkers to do that you're like, well, this isn't going to work. We can't do this. And it morphs itself, and that's a whole team effort. And it's not just one person, it's everybody. And you really do get close to people when you're working with them that much, and traveling and doing events and just, you know, being in close quarters for 8 to 12 hours a day.
Yeah. So there's a couple of questions online that people have posed. I'm going to start with El Hombre's question. He's a little bit disappointed about the fact that you make so many fantastic, wonderful beers, but they're only available at the brewery.
Well, they're not only available at the brewery. Ontario has access to our mail order beer. Anyone can get it in Ontario. We had to switch to the $15 flat rate once after the whole COVID thing just blew the model up a bit. But every beer is available online. It is typically at your door within 48 hours of or at least it used to be, of order. So it's kind of the best we can do, because the LCBO doesn't, it's a bit of a, I think people have a misconception of how we can put beer at the LCBO. It's not as simple as like we make it, put it on the shelf. You have to go through a process that can take months, like 6 months, just to get it listed, and then the labeling process, and then getting it to them. It's not very simple. It's a difficult thing, and we're learning how to deal with the LCBO properly, and it's taken us the better part of 6 years.
And you're still learning, right?
Oh yeah, God, it's this year. Like I think we've sort of it feels like we've sort of unlocked something where we're kind of getting it, but you know, you never know. Next week it might be completely different.
And David's noted that you have a prominent pride flag at the entrance to your brewery. So there's a two-part question here. What prompted the brewery into being such a big LGBTQ promoter?
Well, you know, that was Rob, coming from Rob, and he wants to be inclusive to everybody. He wanted to show that, you know, we're welcoming to anybody. I'm glad he stepped up and did that and pushed that forward. We you know, we've had a lot of LGBTQ people in our work team throughout the years. It's just something that we feel, you know, it's not something we have to yell and tell the world, because we feel it's just something it's just important to us, and we don't need to. I don't mean to. I just like, we don't need to pat ourselves on the back. It's just something that we feel comfortable with. So why not put it up there? Like, it's not, we do it because that's the right thing to do.
Yep. He also wondered, how was that accepted by the community at large?
Oh, it's been great. We host a couple drag shows, and we have a couple of different events. Like we did the Q Beer this year, and for Pride Week, and we support we used to do stuff for there's a Pride Festival in Muskoka. The drag shows, we didn't know how they would go over, but they're rammed, like absolutely packed to the gills. We've been doing them for 3 years, and it's a big draw. Like, unfortunately, we had to cancel this year's because of COVID, but they were always a big event for us and a lot of fun, super exciting times. And we wish we could have done this year's, but I mean, I think there's a lot of events people wish they could have done. So, but yeah, it's the community. I think a lot of people look at Muskoka because they think it's the north, and might not be as accepting, but people are very open in Muskoka, and I mean, very open-minded as well. Yeah,
that's good to hear and good to know. But I love the concept of the drag queen contest. It's such a draw, and it's so much fun for them in their community, but it's also great that everybody else gets to experience that laughter and joy.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
So, when you found the brewery site, the old Canadian Tire store, did you envision running out of rooms so quickly?
Well, no. Well, originally, the original site was a land spot down on the wharf. We were originally going to be a brew pub, and we even there's pictures out there floating around the internet of Rob and I standing in front of this space with T-shirts that say, "The dust will fly in 2012," and that obviously the dust did fly eventually. It just was many years later, but when we had this site, we were going to be a brew pub. We had all the plans built up. We had to do all this stuff. But then we were brewing at Niagara College, and then we started brewing at Black Oak. And by the time we were about to break ground, we were already at the LCBO. And at that point, we're like, we will run out of space before we even have space. So we bought a bigger space. And then, yeah, like I remember walking to the fridge the first time being like, we'll never fill this thing. And then within 2 years, we're like, why didn't we make it bigger? And then having to ship everything out. But those first few years, you know, when that first wave of like all the craft brewing happened 9, 10, 11 years ago, it was a super boom. Like, it was exciting to be there. Like, everything was energized and everybody was expanding. And then, I don't know, that went on for like another 4 or 5 years. And then as the market swelled, there was a sort of a great pause, and everybody sort of leveled off. And it was how they dealt with that leveling off that I think showed where the brewery was going. Like, everybody sort of just was doing this, and it felt like you go to the craft brewing conferences in the States, and it was always, they'd start off going, another banner year, sales are up, everybody's doing wonderful, no end in sight. And then one year you're like, maybe the end is in sight, and everything slowed down, and people had to realize that it wasn't just, this is when this goes back to what I said before, like becoming a business and really focusing on the business side. Like, I was really just focusing on the beer, and I just wanted to make these beers and put that out there. I wasn't monetarily driven at any point in this. And maybe having somebody over here, like, you need both sides. And I wish at the beginning we sort of had been sharper with that. And I think we would have, as a company, been stronger. Other than that, you know, I don't even know where I started with that.
So when you realized what was happening 4 or 5 years ago, when things started to plateau, what was one of the first steps that you as a corporation, as a group, took?
We made 52 beers in a year.
I saw that. I was going to ask that question next.
Again, it might not have, like, the sort of the genesis behind that idea was actually to generate online sales, specifically getting people to order every week. That was the year, like, go back 2 years, online sales were just in the you know, the very beginning, like they were just crawling out of the primordial ooze. No one was doing it. And we had to somehow get out there before everybody. So I'm like, what if we just made a new beer every week? And then there'd never be anything, there'd always be something someone wants to order. And like from a standpoint of production, I'm like, yeah, we can do it. Not taking into consideration all the other little bits and pieces like getting labels, logistically being able to sell 52 different brands in a fridge this big and keeping the product moving and not going stale. And again, someone with better business sense might have told me differently, but instead I was just pushing this beer idea. And I mean, it worked out in our favor because by, this year we were ready to roll with online sales. We were pretty much in a position to do exactly what happened when, not that we planned for the pandemic, but like when it hit, we were able to shift quite quickly to doing online sales only.
So you do have some business savvy then.
No,
Even though you think that was like a far out there idea, pushing you guys early prepared you for all of this.
in a way, it was like a dry run, and it just turns out this year, like without even really noticing, we're 1 week off shy of a beer a week since we started this year.
Wow.
Like the amount of releases we've done, and like we're not even. A lot of it was shifting and changing because of COVID. Like we had to make some pretty big scrambles at the beginning, and I think being small was actually one of the things that helped us because we were able to shift and move a little bit bigger. A bigger company might have had a hard time adjusting to any big changes because it's so hard to shift a large company. But we were just at that size where we could maintain some LCBO presence, but still shift over to somewhere else and not completely collapse. I mean, we did obviously see some layoffs, and we lost most of our production team for a long time. They're just now getting back. Now they got back and then left, but it took us. It was only 2 weeks ago that we finally got the last two guys back.
Okay. Now that answered my other question about how things have been faring through COVID for you.
Well, at the beginning, basically the first week when everyone sort of like the sky was falling, we laid everybody off. There was just three of us in the whole building: myself, our chief operating officer, and our front of house manager. And I was just there sort of monitoring the tanks. And then, there was like a week or two of slowdown. And then all of a sudden the online sort of just went off, and we realized that we had to continue to do this. And LCBO slowed down, but it didn't like drop off.
Yeah.
I remember the day they said all essential workers were I'm like, to me, I was like, oh, well, we're not really essential. So I figured we'd be closed down, but then everybody was essential. And it was like, okay, well, now we're just going to drink more. So we brought half the team back pretty quickly, and then managed to get by for a bit, and then brought another guy back. Then finally we brought another guy back, and then the last two guys within the last couple of weeks. But for a while there, it was pretty hairy. It was a lot. Everyone was doing two jobs at once. And, that can be exciting for a bit, but then it starts to really get a lot of pressure and, maintaining, trying to launch two new brands while we're doing this. It was pretty hairy.
Yeah, I can imagine. Another question from El Hombre. He wants you to tell him more about the electric storm. Why did you want to make a brew like this?
Well, so Electric Storm, it's sort of a refining of a beer we've done in the past called Ale of Two Cities, which began its life as a collab we did with Justin and the guys at Stone City in Kingston. Get it? Ale of Two Cities, Sawdust City, Stone City. Anywho, that beer was a lot more sour. It was very, very mouth-puckering and complete. And it actually, the first iteration really wasn't. This was kind of a bit before Hazers kind of sort of took the main stage. And then we made this beer for 3 years. And then Justin left to go start Matron in Prince Edward County. And we sort of stopped doing it he was really the only guy I knew at Stone City. So sort of out of respect for Justin, we sort of just let it die. and then we wanted to put a sour IPA, the LCBO. We just didn't think as sour as it would be as palatable to a larger audience. Like as a one-off seasonal beer that we sold at the brewery, everyone really liked it, but it was like a super sour beer. What we ended up doing with this one was blending like a 65% sour and 35% regular IPA and fermenting them together to get more of a tart. And it's I find it extremely juicy, lots of orange juice, mimosa vibes. It's entirely too drinkable for 6.9%. And the finishing gravity, like we started it finishing at just below 4, but we found the higher we finished it, the juicier it got. So it actually finishes at 5 now, 5 Platos. So it's like as high as a stout. And it doesn't feel like it at all to me. It doesn't say it on the can, but it still says the 3.5, I think, on the can. But like I said, the recipes, as you sort of refine them, they do change as you go. And, you know, one of the batches just didn't ferment as far as we wanted. So we just increased the starting gravity to get a higher finishing. We found it way more juicy and, like, for whatever reason, more drinkable. So we're like, let's just stick with this. It's like orange juice.
6.9%, it is way too easy to drink.
Yeah. I ran into trouble a few weeks ago at a cottage. We had just packaged it. I took a bunch of Lowies, and it's just, you just start getting into it, and it doesn't take long.
No, I imagine it wouldn't. Jen was curious. How much does the seasonality of cottage country affect the overall business?
Oh, it's quite substantial. This year, I don't know, it's kind of weird because of COVID and the way that the cottage season rolled out, but typically May 2-4 is the sort of kickoff to drinking season and cottage season. So we'll get a spike there, but then it usually falls off pretty sharply until June when the kids and then at the end of June when the kids get out of school. July, August, and the first part of September are absolutely bonkers. You add in, we had Funk Fest in the past, which again we'll have next year. We just didn't have it this year. That day alone is like our biggest selling day of the year. It's incredible. And then it kind of still stays high till about Thanksgiving. And then it's a sharp edge until Christmas. We get a bit of a bump. Some people come up at Christmas time, but then not again till March 17th. When people start drinking again. There's always like that January, February, I'm never drinking again crowd. And then March 17th comes around and everybody's back on the wagon. So, but the cottage season, that we have, 12 weeks to make as much as we possibly can. That's why we were actually building an event space at Sawdust. It was supposed to be open this summer. We were taking the last bit of usable space, which was the garage, the service center at the far end, and turning that into more of a secondary bar / event space, which apparently events aren't ever going to happen again. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's halfway built. We just sort of put pause on it. So, when things do open up, we'll be ready to get that ready and hopefully use it.
Yeah, right now it feels like we're never going to have an event ever again. I understand that.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's not just having the events. I miss seeing the same people at events a lot. Like you get used to the faces and interacting with those guys, and sometimes it's the only time you get to see them. And that part of it is one of the things I love most about this industry. And then to have it taken away right away, it's kind of a bummer. But I know it'll be back. I mean, we still talk and email. And at the beginning, I think a lot of us reached out a lot more because we knew we were going to not see these people for a while. But then day-to-day life gets in the way, and everybody fades back into the real life. So hopefully soon we'll get out there again and see everybody.
Yeah, we all hope that. You went to Berlin.
Yes.
To take the brewmaster course at VLB Berlin.
Yeah.
Why? Just Simple question, why?
Well, it was 2006, so I guess it was the end of 2000. I went in 2006. I went with my wife and some friends to Belgium and France, and I always liked beer, but then seeing and being there, and I'd been to Germany the year before, and then seeing the beer culture in Belgium really like flipped my lid. I'm like, you know what? I really like this a lot. And then when I got back to my day job, I just Googled beer schools. And at the time, the only one that exists, the only two that were really feasible were the VLB in Germany. They also have Weinstefener, but you had to speak German, and it was like 2 years, and it was like an actual diploma, which I didn't really have the time and energy to do, and then, or linguistic skills. And then the other one was in UC Davis in California. There was also Siebel's, I guess, but it seemed a little lesser than the other two. And at the time, I'm like, I like Germany a lot more than I like the US, so I'm just going to go over to Germany. And it was the best 7 months. It was amazing. The people that I went to school with were absolutely fantastic. It was not just learning about beer, but learning about lots of different cultures. Like, we would go spend a lot of time with guys from Spain and Portugal and Korea and Japan and Turkey and the US, and we'd all take turns taking each other out to dinner from whichever country. We'd find a restaurant that was a Spanish restaurant, and she would show us like the Spanish culture, and we learned about that. And then the next week we go to a Turkish bar, and they would teach us about Turkey, and it was awesome. It was just fantastic time. And you know, I was still in like my late 20s, so I had a lot of energy and wanted to learn a lot, and it was fantastic. It was great.
Kieran goes, no one likes UC Davis anyways. So, but I hear you about you know, Germany being an awesome place to go and hanging out with all the people from all over there. How many of those friendships have you kept over the years?
Well, Sebastian, who was a brewer out in Vancouver, I talked to him quite a bit, but then he left brewing to become a Mountie. Like, I actually flew out to his wedding a couple years ago, and we stayed in close contact for a while. Temel I actually just saw him, and he worked down at Left Hand in the States, and he was over in Turkey, and he actually came here to Canada. Like, I don't know the name of the leader that came into power at the time, but he was a crazy guy, and Temel wanted to get out of Turkey, and he came to Canada to see like what it was viable to come here. He had a friend in the US. He ended up landing in the US, and then I saw him last year at the CBC, so that was great to see him. There's a couple of professors. One of them, just an absolute character. His name is Burkhard Meyer. He's always at the CBC and wherever it was, but he dressed like a very traditional German brewer. He kind of looks like Van Helsing, but he speaks with this weird Scottish German accent because he also is a baron. Like, he puts it on his card because he went and bought land in Scotland because he loved the Scottish culture so much, and he sort of incorporated into his life that he had this weird German Scottish accent. And he played the bagpipes, which are called the Udelsack in German. And like, at every Friday after classes were done, we'd all go to the bar at the school, and we'd start singing, and he'd always pull out the Udelsack and start singing some crazy German Scottish song. But I'd see him every year, but a lot of them is just Facebook stuff, but they're still there in the background, and we talk every once in a while. Guy Mike Sweeney, who's an American, but he's actually in Italy right now. He's going to be opening his third brewery in Norway. He had two in France before he went to the school, sold them. He's basically just been farting around the Dolomites, hiking for like whatever. And now he's going to open a brewery in Norway. Like, before COVID, he had just bought the space. I haven't talked to him in a bit, but it looks incredible, the space that he's going to be putting this brewery into. Like, it's mind blowing. So,
wow, what a great collection of friends to have, even if it's only Facebook.
Oh, it is. Like, the pictures they send, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And those friendships and they're a source of inspiration as well, like for ideas and business models and stuff. Like, they keep everything fresh because the more voices you can hear, the larger the screen, I guess.
What was going to be the next beer after Electric Storm?
What's the next beer coming to LCBO?
No. What's the next beer that they should be drinking? Because some of them actually went and got all 3 beers.
Let me look what we said. I got to check this out. I was drinking on the deck when I emailed you that night, so I don't remember. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'll get them for you. Just give me a second. Lumberbrow Light Lager and Needs and Wants Hazelnut Vanilla Milk Stout.
Okay, so yeah, I'd probably go Lumberbrow before we go to the hazelnut because it just will dominate the flavor after that. So Lumberbrow will be becoming more of a core brand. If we're not using the word core anymore. It's just sort of stuff that we brew more regularly.
Yeah.
Little Norway is going to kind of be shifting to more of a traditional Pilsner. Like it was more kind of middle of the road pale lager. But because we're bringing in this light lager, we're going to make Little Norway a little hoppier, a little bit more, a little bit bigger, a little bit more premium, and then bring in the lower ABV Lumberbrow, which super drinkable. We really wanted this to be a great light lager, something that you could just crush a bunch of, but not miss a lot of flavor. Still, it's hopped pretty well. It's only just at 4%, and we use a bit of corn in it to lighten the body. It's super pale, but it's a great backyard beer, after hockey beer, after baseball beer, just your everyday beer, and that's kind of what we were going for. The name Lumberbrow, it's got a baseball theme because the guy James Benson, this came out of the 52 from last year. So James is our production manager, and the beer that he wanted to make was for his baseball team, the Lumber Kings, and he wanted a beer that. These are all like guys from Gravenhurst that drink Busch Light, so he had to make something that was super light that they drink, and so this is his creation. And again, we kept the base idea, but we've refined it to where we like it, and now we've sort of brought it into that more regularly brewed beer. So that'll be around, basically continuing on into the future for now. We've sort of dropped our Gateway Kolsch, sort of went away. Kolsch's seem to be kind of ubiquitous in Ontario right now, and it's sad when you have to like leave a brand behind, but we come back to them the way that we did with Old Woody last month. It's not that they're gone; it's sort of like a band from the '90s. They're just on hiatus until they want to come back and go on tour again.
I hear you. What is the one thing you would like all of us to take away from this tasting and chat tonight?
Oh, geez. Just hopefully you had a good time. I mean, even a beer like a light lager, we do still put all of our heart and soul into, in that none of these beers are ever fully locked in. We're always doing our best to refine them and make them better. They do change over time. They're not always like wholesale changes. They're just little nuances and tweaks. And we're always honestly, every batch we try to do something a little bit better than the one before, while still keeping obviously the consistent line in the middle. But that it's something that we take very seriously. And as much as like we sort of downplay it and might not come across as a serious bunch of people, it is the thing that we take the most serious, and we're very passionate about that.
I know I troll my guests on online before I talk to them. And Sam and I unfortunately didn't have an opportunity to chat last night because I had one of those days which just ended up being completely out of whack all day long. So I found a quote from you that's very apt for what you just said. This is from 2016. I feel that as brewers, we are entertainers. We want to put a story into every brand, so it's not just about the flavors, the taste, and the smell. We want to give people an outlet to relax and enjoy themselves. Beer is our way to do it.
I still feel very strongly about that. And I don't know, if you've probably followed us for a while, you might have noticed that we used to have a lot more stories on our bottles and cans. Like there tended to always be a little blurb or a origin of the story or something that talked about the idea or the, impetus behind the beer. But as we sort of changed as a company, it sort of went more visual than literary or wordy, and like sort of the imagery on beer sort of changed over the last couple of years to be a little bit more minimalistic or a little bit more very, very stylized, and having a bunch of words and busyness on the can sort of was too passe. So unfortunately those things had to go away, and a lot of that, I spent a lot of time on those. Like I pretty much wrote most of them because it's sort of where they came from. We still have our Winewood series, which are always pictures and words together, where they get to do that. But I'm happy that things change too. Like I'm glad we can't stay the same all the time. It's got to move on. But I think we can still tell those stories when we talk to people and do stuff like this and get that across. And we are entertainers, and I wholly believe that. And we're all looking for some sort of entertainment and escape. And if it's beer and the story with the beer, then I'm happy to provide that and just be a part of it.
Thank you. You answered the question I was going to ask. It is still very much a part of you. Alambre says Oodlesack should be a beer you make.
And you know what? That is a great name, but we'll see how the marketing team feels about that.
Yeah, there's probably some implications there.
Yeah.
Kieran wants to know, which beer do you think is most different from the first time you made it?
Probably Lone Pine. If I go back, I mean, a couple years ago we brewed a beer called Lone Prime, which was the first original version of Lone Pine that I did on my buddy's stove on Queen Street. And like it was on that poster that I found today. Actually, one of the people that I sent it to our marketing manager, she's like, "That's not Lone Pine on the glass." I'm like, "No, that's what it looked like, 9 years ago. It was much darker. It was very, very, very bitter. It was, a prototypical IPA for the time, which was, remember, everyone was chasing that IBU chain, right? Like that was what it was all about. And as taste buds changed, as the desires of the drinker changed, so does the beer. I mean, I feel we've still kept a lot of the original idea was that it was going to be, the orange came from like this setting sun on a Muskoka night. That was the idea behind the color. And that's the windswept pine with the, like, sort of that color behind it. So I think we've got that color down. It just took a long time to get there. And it also got brewed on 3 different brew houses before it got to Sawdust. And invariably, the beer is going to change when you brew it somewhere else. Every brew house is different. Every water profile is different. And, until we got it into Sawdust, it was always going to change. But over the last, couple years, it's changed very little. And I really like where it is. And there'll be months I'll go without ever kind of having one. And then I'll go through a stretch where that's all I have for a while. And I'm on that right now. Because we've had so many hazies over the last little while. And I sort of grew to love that style as well. But I still go back to the Loner, and I find it, very drinkable. And I've sort of come to the realization, at least in my head, that West Coast IPAs are very similar to German Pilsners. And if you look at the way you approach the beer, other than the fact that IPA is a little bit more ABV, but you're looking at a dry beer that's very hop forward and aromatic, and it's all about the hops, and it's very drinkable. It's just an American take on a German classic, I think. It's a little bit more boisterous and loud. And if you ask anyone in Europe, the Germans are the Americans of Europe. They're the loud, boisterous ones, but only the Americans can be louder. And I kind of like look at them now, and I see that I've approached them the same way. but like at the beginning, I don't think I saw that. And as you learn about a style, you sort of make some tweaks. And definitely IPAs themselves have changed dramatically in the last 10 years. Like the stuff that I remember, the first hazy IPA I saw, and I was with Aaron Spinney, and he still tells me, he's like, "You were so bad. You were like, this beer's not finished. This is not right." And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It took me a long, and it was the drive for us to do them was more of a push from our younger guys, James and Caleb, when they started wanting to do juicing and like that. It took me a while to sort of wrap my head around that whole idea of what it was. Like in my head, beer is always, a dry, drinkable beer. To get to this sort of lush, creamy, highly under attenuated beer, not under attenuated, just finishing at a different point. It took me a couple of years to get there, and now I appreciate it a little bit more.
Jen, I'm impressed. I was about to ask before you put that up. Jen's always wanting to know, and I've only beat her once in getting the question out. What's your favorite craft beer after Sawdust City?
Well, I mean, I typically drink my friends' beers. Like I really appreciate stuff that my friends brew. I don't think I hardly ever drink the same thing twice or even in a row. But like my favorite beer is when I'm at my friend's brewery and having it with them, because I'm super excited for them and proud of what they do. And then I get to share this with them. I always find that to be my favorite. Like, I don't mean to be avoiding the question in any way, but like, that's how I see it. Like I'm always drinking different things, and even our own stuff, it's always all over the map. But like if I go visit my buddy Dave at Eastbound, I'm always super happy to drink his beer. This weekend, I was just at Justin's place in Prince Edward County and getting to have a beer with him. Like I haven't seen him since February. It was awesome to sit down and finally have a beer after 7 months. It's great, and it's we could sort of share this camaraderie, and that's my favorite craft beer to have, is a beer with my friend at his brewery or her brewery.
Sam, I've known you long enough to know that is not avoiding the question. That is exactly the way I've watched you and Rob at Short Finger together. So I'm not surprised by that answer at all. It is. It's the craft beer industry is small enough that almost everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, I just saw Rob not too long ago, and it was great to finally see him again too. Like that was the last event we were at. Like that was the week before they shut everything down.
That was my third last day at kickoff.
Oh man.
That was my third last day at kickoff.
Terry said that to me, and it was like a heartbreaker.
Yeah, I know.
I'm sure much more for you. And
hey,
then
anytime you need me to come and give you guys a hand, just call.
When this opens up, for sure. And to get to see, when I did see Rob again, he was like, it was the first time I'd seen him, and for him, it was him and Kat, and they were able to say that like she was very pregnant, and I hadn't seen them in the time, so to see that was awesome. Like I know this is a big thing for them, so it was great to see them and see how happy they were, and to give them congratulations. So it was awesome to see him again.
Yeah. And I think we all feel that way when we finally see our friends for the first time. My grandson saw me 8 weeks ago for the first time in like 4 months, and he's running across the park screaming, "Grandma!"
Oh, that's amazing.
And all I'm thinking is, what am I going to do? Because I promised Sarah I would stay 6 feet away.
Were you able to do that, or it was no?
Sam, he got 20 feet away from me, and it was like this. Because he had no idea what to do.
No one prepared us for that.
No, not at all. But he was so excited, and then just like, the world's done. So, but that's how I think we all feel when we see our friends after being apart for so long.
Yep.
David has an interesting question. What's it like being in a beer scene that's a lot more fragmented, if it's only even by distance, in comparison to, say, the Toronto Hamilton beer scene?
I think about this a lot, like where it was and where it's gotten to. And, sometimes I get down on it, like, but I don't want to be that old guy going, I remember when things were this way. I mean, things are always going to change. So, like, I am sometimes sad when it was like there was a small group of us that we all still see each other, like, now and again, but there's always new people, and it's awesome to meet new people. Like, we just did our first collab since we went down with Fenland Falls, and that's the first time I ever met the guy, and it was great to get to meet him and hear his story. And just before we were supposed to do one with the guys from Great Gateway City in North Bay, and they were, we had just met them, and this is how you meet people. And it's one of the things that we love doing at Sawdust, is doing these collabs and meeting new people and sort of creating new friends and friendships. And because sometimes if the business does get hard, it's nice to be able to lean on the fact that you have this great community that's there that keeps wanting to come back. I mean, it is fragmented, and Ontario is huge, but like, we're all a phone call away or text away or a collab away, and it's not. I have no problem driving X amount of kilometers just to go to somebody's brewery. I just drove 700 kilometers last week to go to PEC and see Justin. So it's there. We would drive to KW just for the night to come back the next day hungover to do an event and see people. Like, it's why we do this. And so, like, it's only as fragmented as you make it. You could tighten it up if you just try. I mean, if you really want to. And there's some people who don't, they don't necessarily get on the scene. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just, as Sawdust, that's just what we like to do.
Okay. Derek has a question. I'm a little bit reluctant to ask it. However, I think, how drunk is the typical brewmaster when he writes the story on a can? And he's thinking more GLB than you, okay?
Well, I find 3 beers is a good point of where your brain is firing, and you're open up to new ideas. You hit a creative highway, but then if you get to 5, you probably shouldn't write anymore. So there's somewhere in the sweet spot between 2 and 4. Other than that, sometimes things go off the rails, and you might regret what you put on there. But yeah, I'd say in the 3 beer range. That's a good creative spot.
Great answer.
Not to jump in entirely from the history perspective, but we always used to say in the arts, write drunk, edit sober.
That does make a lot of sense. I mean, I just know my own personal experience where I tend to go a little crazy after a bit, and then I don't know. If it's gonna get, it'll be edited right down to like a few words. If it was like those later ones, so yeah, try to keep it in there.
Derek also wanted to know, what is your favorite beer Sawdust City has ever made? And that's going to be a hard one, because it's got to be up into like 300 and change, almost 400 beers now.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean,
or is there one you're really proud of? That's another way of putting it, I guess.
Well, there's a ton that I'm super that I'm super proud. The Rosé Rousse we did this year, I'm very, very proud of for what we did. The Limberlost, the first Limberlost we did, taking the wild yeast, but I don't know. That's hard. I don't tend to think of them that way. I just, because we do batch to batch changes, like, what am I don't know. That's really hard.
So we'll skip that one, okay?
No, I think you gotta force somebody against that. Like I want to say it's either LDV or Princess. LDV because it was a style that I always wanted to do, and I was really happy with it, and I really liked it, and I liked the concept, and it was sort of the first time I was able to do that. And then Princess because it was a beer for my friends, and those are the friends I was just with this week. So it's those two, and they both are back from when we were still at the college. Like they've been around since basically the inception of Sawdust. So maybe those two, but like if I think about it, I'll just say other things too.
Graham's curious. He says, it sounds like you love stories. Can you tell us a time when the road trip plus the beer and the venue all came together?
Well, that I guess would be Limberlost was one of them. Also the Mountie, like that beer was about my friend who quit the beer industry to become a Mountie. That was sort of like, you know, a road trip being like our entire brewing career. Limberlost the story was about us in the forest.
Yeah. He's thinking more along the lines of
the Eagles Tears. I'm pretty sure we put one on Eagles Tears and Crack a Window with Jeff at Indy. Eagles Tears was about George Eagleson, and Crack a Window with Jeff was literally about a road trip and me in the car.
Tell me more about
having to crack a window. So like,
I want to hear the story behind Crack the Window.
what's that?
I want to hear the story behind Crack the Window.
Well, if Jeff tells it, he'll say that we were in a car and we were driving through the hop fields just outside of Portland. And maybe after a few beers, he was yelling at me to open the damn window. But yeah, that was right from a road trip. And when we got home, we used that because we got an experimental hop from the farm that we went to go visit, and then, you know, put that to beer and then put that to paper. But yeah, that specifically was about a road trip. The one with George was, I was in Ottawa and we'd already made the beer with George. And it was always going to be called Eagles Tears, but it was just a sour red. And I may or may not have had some mushrooms, and then I called my brewer and I'm like, dude, put that coffee caramel stuff that we have in it. And so we did the next day, and what we ended up was this, like, it tasted like a coffee crisp, a sour coffee crisp, like almost exactly like that chocolate bar. And it sold really well, and you know, George really loved it, so that made it great. But that one went off the rails.
Al Ombre wants to know when you're going to start booking bands again for your tap room. Blues bands, which of course he's in, but he's asking for a friend.
Oh, I see, of course. I would say as soon as we can. Like Rob actually wanted to start doing shows and broadcast them from there. But right now, I don't know if that would ever happen. I mean, I don't have a lot to do with the saloon stuff, but it's definitely something that has always been a part of Sawdust. Music has always been a big part of what we do. So as soon as humanly possible, as soon as we get to go ahead. I mean, you're not even allowed to dance and or sing. So I don't know. But as soon as we can, that'll be something that happens right away.
Yeah. Sam, do you have a little more time? Because our hour's up right now, but if you have a little more time, I'm sure we could keep going.
Yeah, if you have a few more questions, I'm open. Yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about the stout, because even though I haven't got it in front of me, a couple people do have it.
The vanilla hazelnut stout. So it's something we wanted to do for a while. We had actually got this to do pre-COVID, but then we didn't know if we do, like, what was going to happen, so it just sort of got pushed to the side. But we wanted to get just use that flavor. Like, we're always trying this. We got Viva Puff coming back. It'll be at the LCBO. And I was just, again, playing with the flavors, and we really liked it. So we wanted to try something a little bit different, a little different than than Viva Puffs. So we came up with this one. Does anyone have it? It's a lot. There's a lot. It's a big beer. So I actually didn't. I took it this week. I drove through on my way from Killarney to Prince Edward County. I had tried it in the fermenter, but I hadn't had a chance to try it in the can yet. So I grabbed a couple cans and I went. They weren't even labeled yet, and I think it was Friday or Saturday, and it was like 30 degrees outside. And I reached into the fridge to grab what I thought was the Lumber Brow, and I was sitting by the pool, and I started pouring the glass, and it was like just the thick black liquid. I'm like, shit. This is like the exact opposite beer that I wanted. So it still tasted great, but I mean, it was 32 and sunny. And then the next two beers after the flavor is just there. It doesn't even come out of the glass. It's just so rich with flavor. It's super creamy, big body. We had a bit of lactose to give it that. We don't typically do milk stouts, but wanted to just try it, put our foot in the game there and try that. And I think it turned out really well. We might revisit it again next year after, again, just like the 52, it's sort of like we put stuff out to see how we can make it better the next time and refine it. And so maybe next winter, that'll be something we come back with again. I mean, it's not typically a beer that you find released in the dog days of summer.
No, it's not typically a dog day of summer beer. But knowing you the way I do, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, yep.
Stouts are great any time of year. I was able to get, like I said, I choked that one back, and it still tasted great.
Graham wants to know what your biggest seller is.
At the brewery, consistently the best seller is Little Norway. LCBO, it's Lone Pine. Draft, it's Lone Pine. When juicing comes out for the first little bit, it always goes a bit crazy, and it's the best seller for a bit. But like over the year, the best seller is Little Norway. So then you might ask, why are we changing it? Because in my heart, I always wanted it to be more of a Pilsner anyways. So having Lumber Brow come along helped push that in that direction, and it sort of reinvigorated our love of lagers. We did that lager series earlier this year, and I'm pretty certain we'll do it again next year. Going out to VQH next week to do our hop pick again. Last year we did a dry hop Pilsner. This year I think we're going to do more of an Oktoberfest, again dry hopped and using exclusively VQH wet hops. So we're excited about that. But yeah, Little Norway's the #1 seller, and we really love lager, so making more of it makes us happy.
Sam, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been
I'm
very
happy.
insightful. And I know everybody here appreciates being able to learn about the creativity, the process that brewers go through, and the trials that founders go through. And but taking time to be with us, that is fantastic. I want to thank you. Remind everybody that next week I've had trouble finding someone to have on, and but it's made me fill up a whole bunch of dates past that point. But hopefully El Hombre and the Crown Bones will join us for some music, and then David has graciously offered to host, and he's going to talk to me.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we've been doing this for Bill. How long has it been? 14 weeks, 15
14
weeks.
weeks.
Yeah, and
We want to do a check-in with everybody to ask things that we can do differently, things that we could do more of. Katie pointed out to me that it would have been smarter if and part of that was my fault being lax getting a hold of Sam, but been smarter if we could have made arrangements to have like 3 cases of beer shipped down and then we just distribute them around.
Oh shit! We gladly would have done that.
Yeah, no, and that's all the learning process that we are going through in this COVID-19 change for everybody.
And it's funny when, technically the co-founder, which is myself, is so looking forward to the stream, and his package didn't arrive on time because he just didn't order it in time. So I will have
I wasn't going to point that out.
I will have so much Sawdust City Brewery beer tomorrow or the day after, but not enough in time for the stream.
Well, now you have all the background information.
Oh, and also, Sam, don't get me wrong. Like, my buddy lives in Barrie. I go to Sawdust pretty often. I love your beer. So having a bunch.
Next time you're there, pop in and say hi. I'm usually around.
I absolutely will, for sure. No, and just to continue on Bill's thing is, like, we've been doing this for a while, and I don't think we've really taken a hot second to say to everyone on the stream what we're really trying to do. And so I think this is a great period for everyone to get a greater understanding of what we're attempting. And so I'm hoping that with me hosting, Bill can give a good enough explanation as to what we're doing, and I'll be reversing roles with him to facilitate more what exactly Kickoff Annex is trying to be.
Kieran, I get your point on that. I'm not 100% certain how we could do that. But I do appreciate the fact that you join in sometimes on your break at work.
Yeah, Pacific time, man.
So, yeah. Kieran was a long time Kickoff regular while he was at university. So
I live in San Diego, and I'm drinking what I just checked turns out to be a 10